Welcome to 701 Civics. I'm your host, Brian Pechtel. On this episode, we're talking about medical marijuana in North Dakota. Whether you're curious, confused, or just want to understand how the program works in our state, we've got you covered today. We're joined by State Director of Medical Marijuana, Jason Wahl, who's here to walk us through how it all works, from patient access to legal protections, and what the future might hold. Let's get into it. All right, everybody, thanks for joining us on 701 Civics. Today, my guest is Jason Wahl, the Director of the Division of Medical Marijuana, and you've been there since its inception, correct?
Actually started in the director role full-time a little after the program was starting to be implemented, January of 2018. Became associated with the program to try to help out, write some administrative rules, and with the departure of the former director, moved into an intern position, and in one of those spots where when you first start off with a department and they ask you to do something, saying no is not really an option, so you say yes, and over 7 years later, here I still am, Brian.
Okay. If you could give us just a little bit of background, we were talking before we started, when the measure passed, roughly, and kind of what was the intent of maybe the voters at that time?
So in November of 2016, there was an initiated measure placed on the ballot for the citizens of the state to vote on. That medical marijuana provision, as it came to be, did pass. So in 2017, the legislature started looking at that measure. They actually abolished the measure. One of the first things they did that session, they voted to not pass it, eliminate that chapter of Century Code while they worked on provisions to be implemented by the state. So really in April of 2017, the legislature came to agreement on a passage of a medical marijuana program. Since it was an initiated measure, it did require a 2/3 majority vote by the legislature to get passed. That is something that's always difficult, to make changes to the measure, to get 2/3 of that body on both sides to come to agreement. So in April of 2017, the law was enacted and the department started implementing then the provisions for the program. In March of 2019, the first dispensary opened in the state, and by the end of that calendar year, the department had issued registration certificates to the maximum number of dispensaries, which is 8.
Okay. And let's start with the basics. What is medical marijuana, and how is it different from what recreational marijuana is?
So in North Dakota, the medical marijuana program allows an individual who's been registered by the Department of Health and Human Services to lawfully purchase and possess dried leaves and flowers and other product types allowed by state law. There are limits on the purchasing amounts in a 30-day period, and there's also possession limits that must be adhered to by these registered qualifying patients. To obtain a medical marijuana card, an individual has to complete an online application. They need to have a healthcare provider complete what's called a written certification, and then they also have to have a qualifying medical condition. In contrast, in a recreational program, really an individual simply needs to be of a certain age, typically it's 21 and over, and they're able to go into a dispensary that's licensed by the state and make purchases. The products that are available both under a medical program and the recreational program are basically the same. You'll see very similar product types with some slight differences depending on what the state requirements are. Whether it's medical or recreational, though, both programs are regulated at the state level.
Is the North Dakota medical marijuana program similar to what's now around us with neighboring states?
There are some differences in regards to when you look at Montana, South Dakota, Minnesota, but overall the general theme of a medical marijuana program is there in place. An individual has a certain condition, they need to be identify that condition. Typically they're getting a card that they're able to show or some type of document at a licensed or registered dispensary and are able to make purchases.
Sure. So the legislature has to make laws surrounding this. For Health and Human Services, do you get to get up there and testify? Obviously, I would imagine it has to be neutral testimony, or does it?
The testimony that the department provides really is going to depend on the type of change the legislature may be looking for. For example, in past sessions, there's been a bill introduced to allow home grow under the program. Most sessions, the department did take a stance in opposition to that based on the concerns that the department had from a health and safety standpoint and what the department has seen in other states that allow home grow. I mean, multiple plants in excess of what's allowed, homes getting ruined, children being exposed to an environment that is not healthy. Those plants then are not tested, so the concern for individuals using home grow plants was there. So in certain cases, the department would oppose certain changes or bills that were there. The department has supported bills as well. In most cases, though, what the department's stance has been with the program is really this is a legislative decision.
Sure.
If the industry brings forth something through or to a legislator and they've been able to provide that information, what we want to make sure is legislators have correct information, accurate information, so they can make an informed decision. Once legislators make their decision, it's the department's responsibility then to implement that to the best of its ability.
Sure. So what's your day-to-day role kind of look like?
Really, my day-to-day role varies greatly depending on the time of year, usually, or kind of what's going on in the program. I'm grateful that each day I get to work with a very dedicated team of individuals with the medical marijuana program. So while I may be here answering the questions, it's really the team that makes the program run. In a given day, I could be working with or speaking with various industry representatives, talking with other states. My counterparts provide helpful information in regards to what's going on in their state that we could maybe use or mirror here in North Dakota as well. Also have discussions with healthcare providers, law enforcement, legal, registered patients, or just the public looking for information. There's some data review that's done that able to utilize reports and other information from our IT system. And then once every 2 years, there's about a 3 to 4 month period that rolls around with legislative session where my role really changes quite a bit for that 3-4 month time period. And the time needed to monitor bills, provide information, testify or sit in through committee hearings does take up quite a bit of time. Really, my role can vary from day to day, even in the same day, the various things that happen, which is kind of a benefit of working in the field. I should point out, when it comes to role and responsibilities, the Department of Health and Human Services role is really one of a regulatory role. It is our responsibility to make sure that what the laws the legislature enacted have been complied with, and then any changes that the legislature has made to laws to get those implemented in the timely manner to make sure that what was intended and what is to take place actually does occur.
Right, regulatory instead of potentially enforcement of something.
So there are some enforcement techniques, I would say, in regards to where the department has the ability for noncompliance issues to take some type of action through sanctions or other areas. We are responsible for ensuring compliance, so we do visit dispensaries and manufacturing facilities. We are monitoring information through our IT system, looking for anomalies, and we do have live feed access to every dispensary and manufacturing facility in the state. They also then are required to maintain video recordings for 90 days. So if we become aware of something, we're able to go back and watch that video to determine whether we have a non-compliance issue or no, there was actually compliance with that specific provision.
Gotcha. Okay, interesting. Well, let's look a little bit more how the program works. And I guess the one thing that I suppose a lot of people ask is, how does one qualify to use medical marijuana in North Dakota?
So an individual does need to have a current medical marijuana card that's issued by the department. To obtain that card, The individual has to have a North Dakota driver's license or a North Dakota non-driver identification. They have to complete an online application, and then they will need to have a healthcare provider complete a section of the application called a written certification. The healthcare provider in that part of the application will identify what condition that individual has that qualifies them for the program. So somebody doesn't self-certify that, yes, I have this condition. It's actually a healthcare provider who has to do that. I would say people that are interested in the program, who want to apply for a card, should certainly visit the program website at hhs.nd.gov/mm. There is a lot of information out there for people to review, from application instructions to frequently asked questions, and really a nice step-by-step guide to help them if they are to complete an application.
Okay. What are some of those sample conditions that are listed on the website?
So if you take a look, medical conditions are actually set in state law in North Dakota. So there's 26 medical conditions specifically listed in the statute. That list includes cancer, epilepsy, a terminal illness, PTSD, anxiety, and other conditions. That list has been relatively stable now for the past several years. 2019 was the last time we saw a bill get passed that changed that list, and it actually added 12 conditions, and since that time those same 26 have been in place.
Gotcha. And so state law, not in just something like a rule change or anything like that?
Correct. And sometimes we do hear from individuals that, well, why don't you add this condition? And that's not really what the department's able to do. That is a legislative decision. And we inform people who are maybe interested in looking at having another condition added to talk to their local legislator or reach out to a legislator to be able to start that process. The department's only able to use that list that's in law. The department has no authority to add to that list or accept a different medical condition that isn't on the list.
Right. Are medical professionals in North Dakota trained at all as far as how to help that patient, or is it just simply here's the diagnosis and you're good?
So the training in the, healthcare world and medical world on marijuana, I would say overall and historically has been lacking, mainly due to the fact that this is a Schedule I drug and it's not a prescription. Marijuana isn't prescribed by healthcare providers, and until state programs were starting to be developed in other states and looking at, implementing these medical marijuana programs, there wasn't marijuana typically being used for a medical purpose. So the healthcare provider role is really that written certification. There were some changes in the 2019 session in regards to healthcare providers' role, because there was some concern from the medical community about how the law read in regards to what their role was. So really, healthcare providers are completing that written certification. Tells the department that yes, they have this qualifying condition, they have a relationship with that individual. That meets the definition of a provider-patient relationship under state law. As far as the education for individuals who get a card, really that's been done at the dispensary level. Education consultations can be done there to discuss with individuals, especially those that are new to marijuana, product types, what to expect, potential side effects, things to be cautious about, takes place at that dispensary level. And I think the one thing I would say that we've heard enough from, and even from dispensary personnel, an individual with a certain medical condition that used the product and it was very successful for them, or it worked very well for them, I should say. Another individual with that exact same medical condition, exact same product, may not have any, I would say, success with, or that it helped alleviate or treat any of their symptoms that they have due to their medical condition. So there are individuals that need to try to use multiple products before they're able to potentially find one that works for their medical condition.
Sure. So does that materials that dispensary is using to counsel the person, whatnot, is that provided by Health and Human Services, or is that just materials that they're finding themselves?
The education materials at dispensaries is what they have developed. We are aware of what their education materials are. We reviewed them, so we're aware of, what they're including and what really the role there is to make sure there isn't something that, okay, we're actually providing some information that is not the case in the marijuana field at this point in time. And after that, dispensaries are there. They're the industry experts. They're the ones that are to have that knowledge and provide that information to the registered qualifying patients.
Got it. Well, let's look a little bit access and availability around the state of North Dakota. First off, how many dispensaries are there across the state, and what was that process like for them, being it is a Schedule I?
So state law identifies a maximum of 8 dispensaries to be registered under the program. As the program was being implemented, we knew very early on, and it was clear to the department, that since you only had 2 manufacturing facilities and they were just beginning operations, you couldn't just have 8 dispensaries open all at once. There was not going to be an availability of product. You could have had 8 dispensaries open with nothing to sell, and that just was not going to work very well. So the department actually developed a plan to kind of phase in dispensaries. And what the department was concerned with was, due to the rural nature of the state and where people reside, and to try to eliminate potential travel time, the department implemented a plan that dispensaries were to be located within a 50-mile radius of 8 cities. It then used an open application period. The first application period was open for 2 dispensaries, Fargo and Bismarck. That second round then we opened up for Grand Forks and Williston. And then the last round we had the remaining 4, Devils Lake, Dickinson, Jamestown, and Minot. So those are the 8 locations. I would say the dispensary specific locations or addresses, as well as their hours of operation, are available on the medical marijuana program website. So people may want to take a look at that and be able to see, specifically where they're located and then hours of operation.
Being it is so tightly controlled, North Dakota, is it, how many companies actually are involved separately then?
Right now with the 8 registered dispensaries, if you look at the dispensary names, you can see very clearly 4 are Curaleaf. There's 3 Pure Dakota Health, and then there's 1 in Grand Forks called Strive Life. So there's 3 entities involved there. Manufacturing facilities, Grassroots is located in Fargo, and then Pure Dakota is located in Bismarck. While they're separate legal entities, Pure Dakota and Pure Dakota Health are very similar, and Grassroots and Curaleaf are very similar as well.
Sure. So there are a wider variety of products, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, was it this last session or the session before that expanded that a little bit?
The last 2 sessions, from a product standpoint, 2 sessions ago, there was an increase in the amount that was allowed to be purchased on the concentrates and other product types, going from 4,000 milligrams of THC in a 30-day period to 6,000 milligrams. This last session, there was one of the bigger changes that we've seen, and it had been attempted in various sessions before, and that was adding a cannabinoid edible product to the program.
Okay. And there's some pretty strict regulations on, is it what it looks like or marketing?
So I want to make sure it's clear. The cannabinoid edible product, that law goes into effect here on August 1. However, we want to make sure people don't have an expectation that on August 1, I'm going to line up at the door at the dispensary to buy this new product. That won't be the case, because manufacturing facilities aren't authorized until August 1 to process an edible product for market. So you're probably looking late August, beginning of September is what we're estimating for when that product would go to market. The legislature made it very clear that the product type is only one thing, and that is a square-shaped item. Square-shaped only. We suspect it's going to start off as probably a gummy square, and the legislature put in some requirements related to packaging and labeling and making sure that these aren't marketed towards minors. The department did immediately draft administrative rules to go through the administrative rule process, so rules regarding what the department put into rules could become effective as soon as possible. If everything goes as planned, they would become effective on October 1. The drafted rules do require, for example, each of those squares to be stamped with THC or another department approved type emblem or letters. The square-shaped edible has a maximum of 5 milligrams of THC in it. This is a very conservative approach by the legislature to kind of start down the edible road. You're not going to see your cookies, brownies, beverages, candy bars that you maybe see if you go to other states. It is only going to be that square-shaped item that will be available more than likely towards the end of August, beginning of September.
Sure. Well, let's jump into legal stuff, patient rights, and so on. Are there limits to where patients can use medical marijuana? Can they carry it with them? Does it have to be in the home? What has North Dakota developed on that?
So before I get into that, Brian, I want to make sure that I am not a lawyer, so anything I may be saying here in regards to this shouldn't be construed as legal advice,
Sure.
and certainly not taken as legal advice.
Yeah.
Registered qualifying patients are authorized under state law to possess and transport medical marijuana as long as the possession is in compliance with the laws and the rules. For example, state law allows a registered qualifying patient to possess up to 3 ounces of dried leaves and flowers. Obviously, if that individual was transporting 10 ounces of dried leaves and flowers, they would not be in compliance with the law, even if everything was in the original packaging with the labels attached. The same smoking provisions and vaping provisions that apply to tobacco also apply to the medical marijuana program. When at home, registered qualifying patients should keep products out of the reach of children. And one thing that I want to make sure to say that products should never be used around a minor if that minor could be inhaling the smoke or vapor. That is very clear in statute in regards to that, and something that the department, and we have informed legislators, we will follow up with that in regards to taking some action on a registered qualifying patient's card if we're aware of that instance occurring. There are other limitations in law, as well as protections that are specifically included in statute. A registered qualifying patient, the law says, is not subject to arrest or for the acquisition or use of medical marijuana as long as it's in compliance with the provisions of the law. The state law does include a number of limitations, though, also on there. You have your possession and where you can consume activities that aren't allowed, such as operating a motor vehicle under the influence of marijuana.
So, and we may have talked a little bit, but can those patients, because it is North Dakota, they can't really transport this across a state line, correct?
You are correct. Since this is still a federal illegal drug, crossing state lines with products is not allowed. And the protections that are provided to a registered qualifying patient in North Dakota are specific to the products it purchases at one of the 8 dispensaries. So maintaining the packaging, keeping the labels that are attached to those products is what gives them the protection if they were to be pulled over by law enforcement, for example. Driving to Montana, or soon to be able to drive to Minnesota and purchase from a recreational program and bringing them back into North Dakota, there are no protections in state law for somebody to do that. And then it becomes a law enforcement issue in regards to what law enforcement will do in those instances.
Okay. An interesting question, I think, for myself. The federal government has laws in place, particularly against handling of monies and so forth. How is money handled in these types of places? Because banks are probably not going to be depositing and Visa isn't going to be used, correct?
Well, when you have a state-run program that dispenses a federal illegal drug, that does come with some problematic areas. Banking is one of them. Actually, banks can be involved in a regulated marijuana program.
Okay.
However, the banks that are going to do that have to do a lot of additional work, and the federal government has placed a lot of restrictions on banks that want to do that. So the majority of banks just are not going to do it. And the limited number of banks who will do that need to recover those extra costs associated with this additional work required by the federal government. So if the industry does find a bank to work with, there's going to be some relatively high fees associated with that. So as a result, I would say that, there's more cash involved in the marijuana industry than a non-marijuana industry.
Sure.
Be that as it may, dispensaries here in the state will accept certain electronic payments. And typically when we're asked about that, what kind and what type, we say to just check out the dispensary's website or contact them prior to visiting so you're aware of what the requirements are and how payments can be made.
Sure. Last couple of questions. How many North Dakotans are currently enrolled in the program, and does that look to be growing? Is it steady currently?
Currently, there's approximately 10,600 individuals with a qualifying patient card. We saw significant growth in the program beginning that second year that dispensaries were operational up until about the summer of 2023. Now we're seeing more of just kind of a gradual growth. During that time when there was significant growth, we were probably averaging around 200 more patients a month, where now we're maybe in that 30 to 50 patient increase per month, and some months we've even gone down a little bit over time. So while the patient population continues on that upward trend, that trend just has leveled off.
Sure. And so last, one of the things we've seen are several ballot initiatives to legalize recreational marijuana. If it's ever passed, what might the impact on medical marijuana look like?
There's a question that I don't mean to punt on or kick the can down the road, but it's ultimately going to depend on what that recreational program, the requirements are, what impact then that'll have on the medical program. For example, most states that have those types of programs have a tax on the purchase of those types of products. If that tax is relatively large or high, then people may be incentivized to maintain or get their medical marijuana card just from a tax savings type purpose. Product types that are made available and how much can be purchased or possessed under a recreational program can also impact the medical marijuana program. I think historically what we've seen in the other states that went medical and added the recreational side, typically that medical program patient population went down.
Significantly, or?
It depends on what type of changes were made in those programs. So what we would say is we'd really need to look at what the law was and provide a fiscal impact then in regards to the medical program, and also if the department was responsible for regulating the recreational, the impact it would have then on the department as well.
Got it. Well, thanks for coming about a very interesting and always a hot button issue. If people have questions, again, the website is what?
People can get information at hhs.nd.gov/mm, and Brian, really appreciate the opportunity to talk about the program, and people should always know that they're able to reach out to us if they would like, if they have questions. Talk to your healthcare providers. If you have questions, you can contact the dispensary and certainly contact the program as well.
All right. Jason Wahl, Director of the Division of Medical Marijuana. Thank you very much. Thanks for listening to this episode. If you learned something new, be sure to share this episode with a friend. And as always, thanks for listening. And remember, you can always find more North Dakota-focused episodes wherever you get your podcasts. And don't forget to listen 24/7 on Radio Access 102.5 and radioaccess.org for more local programming.